a real estate group webinar for self-employed people, real estate related and not, but now we're really focusing on the real estate piece of this as we move forward, right? And we're not going to use any sort of buzzwords or terrible words that the governor's been using in Massachusetts. But it's still, we're still feeling its impacts, although in very, very different ways. The structure of today is how we'd like it to go is we have put together a small presentation. Our CPA friends were not available today. It is approaching a tax deadline. So we understand that they can't quite be available. So what I did is I put together kind of a layman's term of the economic injury disaster loan program, just to kind of give you guys an update as to what we are seeing and what we have found that you can and cannot use funds for. But again, I'm not really as professional. We're going to start with Rich Vetstein, who's going to go into his updates on the lawsuit that he brought against the Commonwealth in regards to the eviction moratorium and its impact on landlords and housing providers. And a second up, we'll have Tim Lumen, who is going to be coming up with a bunch of the local statistics as far as what he is seeing in the local markets and just kind of keeping us abreast of what's happening on the absorption rates, on the foreclosures, short sales. We have that moratorium, but we're going to see what he has to say. So that said, if anybody has any questions while we have a guest speaking, feel free just to post it into the chat box. Brianna, myself, Matt, or Jared will be getting back to you guys if the speaker doesn't themselves. And we really appreciate you guys all being here for us. So that'll be the order. We'll have Rich up first, then Tim, and then I'll close it up with the loan details that we have been finding out. So after that, I will pass it off to Rich. And Rich, if you, for some of the new people who will join us and on the recording, if you don't mind kind of giving also a synopsis of what has occurred to date, that would be great.
Sure. We'll do. And I can also share my screen and I can show you the court docket, which might be helpful. So
perfect.
I can start doing that now, actually.
Yep. You know how to do that with the new share button or share screen button?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go. Oh, I just had to, let's see if this works.
Okay.
I just got a new computer, so, oh, here we go.
I did see it's an Apple product, so that's, good for
It
some
is.
of us.
Okay, can you guys see that now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so thank you all for being here. My name is Rich Vetstein. I am an attorney. So I was hired essentially asked by mass landlords and some other groups to lead the challenge to the eviction moratorium. And we were able to round up a couple plaintiffs, Mitchell Matorin and Linda Smith, who are both small property rental owners, both own property in Worcester, and both were impacted by the moratorium. Fairly sympathetic folks. They're not the corporate landlord types. So with Mr. Matorin, he had an existing summary process case in progress in Worcester Housing Court, where his tenants owed him about $6,000 in rent, and that was, stopped cold by the moratorium. So those tenants are no longer paying him rent, and I think he's probably owed up to 10 grand by now. Linda Smith has tenants who are also not paying her, and she was about to start the process and bring sort of a notice to quit, and the moratorium went in place, so she's stuck as well. And with her tenant actually told her he does have the financial ability to pay her, but he said, the governor says I don't have to pay you, so I'm not going to. So she's another sympathetic client here. So as you can see from, this is the court docket, we filed the case on March 29th in the Supreme Judicial Court. It's kind of a unique situation because usually you have to file in the lower trial court or the housing court or maybe even federal court, but we decided to invoke this special procedure like some of the other COVID cases, and we filed directly to the SJC, which really the SJC is going to have the final word on this anyways because it's such a big deal. So we filed directly with the SJC, and as you can see, right away the Attorney General got involved and entered their appearance, and it's actually put in a veritable dream team of appellate lawyers. Their top appellate lawyer, senior most appellate lawyer, and some other very good lawyers that were on the case, and they immediately started some procedural maneuvers. Long story short, the housing tenants organizations like City Life and some of these other ultra liberal organizations, they tried to intervene in the case as parties. So we had to brief that issue. So basically it was like 2 weeks of kind of back and forth procedurally. But now the single justice, which is David Lowy, has the case formally under advisement. It's been under advisement since June 15th. So we're waiting like with bated breath any day as to it. We're not going to get a final ruling, but the ruling that will get is whether or not the full court is going to hear the case. We're hopeful the AG actually said they want the full court to hear the case. So we think it's got a very good shot at that happening. And we're getting a little frustrated that the single justice is kind of sitting on it for the last week, but we've been calling there like every day to see what's going on. So we're hopeful we're going to get some news soon. And after this, then if assuming the court hears the case, agrees to hear the case, then it'll get assigned a oral argument date, and then kind of the floodgates will open because all the friend of the court folks will start jumping in on the case. So, we've reached out on our side to some of the landlord groups who actually haven't been as helpful as we would like because a lot of them think this is like a political hot potato. So Mass Landlords has been not terribly helpful because they have legislation going on with CHAPA regarding this rent surety bill, which I think is frankly a waste of time, but that's neither here nor there. Greater Boston Real Estate Board said no. Mass Association of Realtors said no. A lot of the bar associations said no. We're looking at like groups like the Cato Institute and some of the property rights, kind of the more, right-wing conservative. They expressed some interest. So, but on the tenant side, you're going to expect, an avalanche from all the tenant groups and the left-wing groups to join in. And so that briefing will take a couple weeks, and then we'll have an argument, and then the court will make a decision. So we could be like 2 or 3 weeks out from a final ruling. We're hopeful. We are optimistic. We think we got a good case. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, in terms of the moratorium is going to expire. Well, that's the tricky part. August 18th is the date that's set in the act. However, there is a lot of talk about that this moratorium will be extended, and the governor can extend it for 90-day periods, successively 90-day periods, and virtually unlimited. There's also being legislation filed by some of these state reps like Mike Connolly and Kevin Honan to extend it legislatively. We were on a call today with Congressman Ayanna Pressley and Mike Connolly. They did this Facebook Live, and all the talk is they want this moratorium in place at minimum through the end of the year. So that would be through January 2021. And a lot of them were talking, they want it in place for a full entire year. So that would be obviously a disaster for everyone. And they don't seem to understand that if you're gonna do a moratorium on eviction, you have to put in place a massive rent stabilization financial aid package for everyone that you're hurting, landlords and the tenants. And that's just not gonna work if the only people that you're penalizing are, of course, the rental property owners, because it totally shifts the burden of COVID-19 and financial impact from tenants to landlords. And essentially what it does is creates almost like state subsidized housing on a grand scale. So it's just, it's a disaster in the making. So it's really important for everyone to get out there and start talking about it and participating in, some of these Facebook Live events, or do your lobbying, talk to your state rep, email the governor's office, and make sure that they do not extend the act. I mean, hopefully we'll have a ruling before then, but there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that the SJC is going to agree with us. We're hopeful, but challenging a statute is always an uphill battle. So we really need to see some kind of grassroots that is equally as effective as the tenants, because fortunately they do a really good job with getting their people out there and talking about it and voting about it and everything else. So anyways, if you want to learn more about it, this is my blog. I'm doing daily updates. I'm also doing daily updates. Well, not daily, but weekly updates via email. So you can plug your email into the chat box and I can put you on the list. So again, we're just, it's literally any day we should be finding out. We're also talking about if we don't hear from the court by Friday, then we might think about moving the challenge over to federal court or filing a parallel action in federal court. The only problem with federal court is they don't hear the state law claims. We think our best shot is actually under the state constitution, but if the SJC is going to kind of sit on this, then we might not have any other choice but to go give a shot at federal court and see what they say. So anyways, we're really trying to exhaust all of our options here and put up the biggest fight we can against this, because it's really unprecedented. We've been through, the Great Depression, World Wars, the 1917 flu pandemic. No time ever in Massachusetts history has the courthouse actually been closed by the legislature ever. So this is really an unprecedented infringement on everyone's constitutional rights. So,
and to take that step back too, Rich, I think sorry, Matt. Sorry. For those that are new, or for those that are new to the recording as well, the biggest question that we continue to receive are, what can I and what can't I do with tenants? I know you've answered this before, but I didn't know if you wanted to do a quick boiled down version and then point people to your blog.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the short answer is you really can't do much of anything. So what they've done is they've set up these two new definitions of evictions, one called a non-essential eviction and the other called an essential eviction. So basically all the kind of garden variety cases, like a non-payment case or a termination of a tenancy at will, a post-foreclosure case, a rent increase case where the tenant says, I don't want to pay the extra rent, but then stays and doesn't leave. All of those cases are subject to the moratorium and cannot move. You can't start an eviction. You cannot send a notice to quit. You can't send a legal notice out. You can't start an eviction. If you have an eviction that's pending, you can't move the case at all. The act goes so far as to say that you can't even do any sort of filings in the case. So you can't even do like a motion for rent escrow or try to get the move out order or anything. It's just a total freeze on the case. The only exception, called an essential eviction, is it has to be either criminal activity or a lease violation that materially endangers the health of other occupants or neighbors or first responders. And when we were on the call with the housing court, basically the judges said the only thing that would be an essential eviction is if basically someone got shot, on the premises. But if you're just talking like drug activity or smoking or noise or any of that kind of stuff, the court is going to say, no, that is non-essential and we're not going to hear the case. So basically the entire system is shut down. There is also a new notice that is been put out by the Executive Office of Economic Development. Instead of a notice to quit, you can send out it's called a notice of arrearage. it's really comical because it basically says, yeah, hello tenant, it's a friendly reminder that you haven't paid your rent. And then you're mandated to put all the websites of all the tenant organizations in that notice to give them help. And not just help with paying rent, but also help fighting an eviction. I mean, these are all the tenant organizations that will come up and, get tenants free lawyers and everything else. So it's actually, I wouldn't recommend sending that out. So you can talk to a tenant, personally over the phone. I wouldn't put anything in writing in terms of, hey, where's the rent? Any of that kind of stuff. If you're going to have a conversation with your tenant, make sure it's off the record, undocumented. But essentially you're in a holding pattern, and it's an indefinite holding pattern, unfortunately.
Rich,
No late fees either. I see a comment there. Can't charge late fees, can't ding the credit, can't do anything there. And there's also a special form that the tenant can send back that says that it's a COVID-19 related hardship, at which point you absolutely can't touch them at all. So again, my blog has all that information.
Rich, I wanted to go back and circle back to what you were talking about a little while ago with your kind of desirability to take it to the federal level if need be. What do you envision being the best case scenario, and then potentially a worst case scenario should the SJC rule in your favor or rule in mass landlords' favor? Do you see this as ending the moratorium, or do you envision that there will be an opportunity for landlords to potentially collect damages through the court?
Yeah, so the first goal would be to strike it down as unconstitutional. And we have made the claims for monetary damages, but that's a much longer process, and it involves the class action type of process. And that would be a much longer haul because there's a whole lot of complexities with class actions and funding that. And, you've seen, like, you've all, kind of seen like the tobacco settlements and all that kind of stuff. Those things are monsters. So the first goal has always been to just strike it down and have it end. We have
when you say that, you're talking the moratorium.
The moratorium, yes. Yep. So it would not be in effect anymore. But the caveat is that that's not going to necessarily preempt the court system itself from taking kind of reasonable COVID-19 health considerations into effect. So, for example, the housing court, on any given Thursday, it's jam full of people. That is unsustainable now with COVID. So they have to come up with a different way of hearing the cases, whether it's through Zoom or whether it's some kind of virtual queue, or, they got to figure that out. They are going to be allowed to handle that administratively, which will naturally kind of slow things down, but the legislature just can't, stop the faucet from running. But so the courts can kind of take their own action. And we've been doing Zoom hearings now in Superior Court, and they've been very good. So there's no reason why the housing court can't do the same thing. Of course, you have a lot of low-income people coming through, and, you have technology and you have those kind of barriers. But, I assume those people are the same ones, buying stuff on Amazon. So there's no reason why they can't, sit on a video conference call for their case for a half hour. So, but that all remains to be seen. What we've been hearing from the court in terms of like Superior Court and Probate Court and all the other courts is like, you don't expect things to be up and running even on a virtual basis until closer to August. I think that's more of the kind of the target. So
two quick questions to follow up on that, Rich. Let's take it from the first one. Has there been any other state where there's maybe potential precedent for this going on right now that you guys can piggyback and make the argument that some other state in the country has taken this action, and that there might be something that Massachusetts can that you guys can grab a hold to and point to Massachusetts should follow their lead with?
Yeah, so we were the first case to file. So some folks in New York have filed. Their case is still pending, no ruling yet. California, they filed again after us. Their case is pending. We're seeing, I think, in Michigan, they filed again. We were the first ones, so we haven't seen any. We have a monitor going on all the cases. So the minute there is a favorable ruling, we'll be using that. We did use the. You remember the Attorney General had the debt collection regs that they put into place that was in federal court. So we cited that a lot in our brief because that went in favor of the debt collector. So there's some similarities, not completely, but definitely some similarities. So, I mean, our brief was 70 pages. I mean, if you look at it, it was like, basically like your worst book report ever written.
Oh, wait, a real quick follow-up to that before I get to my last question for you. If there is another one of those states that you mentioned, California, New York, Michigan, if any one of those cases somehow or other move forward and there is precedent set, do you see that being as a help to other states that have those cases pending? Or do you envision as Massachusetts being a very tenant-friendly state, having always been a very tenant-friendly state, is not going to give as much credence to that precedent as they would in other cases?
Well, good question. So when you're dealing with the Supreme Court of any state, any of those other cases are not binding precedents on them. They can be what's called persuasive, depending on their reasoning, but they're not bound by them. The only thing that could bind the SJC would be a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, and we're not going to see any moratoriums hit the U.S. Supreme Court anytime soon, if ever. So, but like the reasoning can be persuasive, and but the SJC is the ultimate authority on what our state constitution says, and we'll have to wait and see what they say. So, certainly if any case comes down in the interim period, there's a mechanism where we can bring it to the court's attentions, and we'll obviously do that.
Last question before we get into some of these comments in the chat box, as you see that there are about 3 or 4 in there, and I want to make sure we get to those. But the last question I have for you is, people are going to start making the argument, Massachusetts is starting to, as of today, phase 2 or part 2 of phase 2 has opened back up. New York finally just opened up their real estate market. Their market had been completely shut down, no showings, no nothing for the last 3 months. Their market opened up today. As more and more things here in the state open back up and people are getting the claim of maybe being able to go back to work, do you see that having any correlation here to what we're talking about? Or do you see that as being a completely separate facet here that people should not be paying attention to the state's reopening plan, and this is with the courts being a completely separate entity, and this is going to move at a pace that is not really indicative or being able to construct a time frame for anything?
Yeah, good question. So, I think the next kind of frontier on the legislative side or on the bill side is what Governor Baker does, and what the legislature does. So, as we approach May 18th, and let's assume that the court, rules against us, then it would set to expire May 18th, and Governor Baker could then make a decision whether or not to extend it. So obviously, all the benchmarks and the economic status are going to play heavily into that. Same thing with the legislature. The problem with the legislature is the bill was, pushed through by a lot of the progressives. And they have a big constituency, especially, and it's growing because of the economic pain that's going on. So you have a lot of people who are out of work and who are being affected, and they're voters. So their lobby is strong. So my own personal feeling is I would not be surprised even if we are have a lot of good news come August, that they will extend this for another 90 days.
When you say that, you're talking about the moratorium. So
The moratorium. Yeah. So that's, again, that's why the court cases are so critical, because I think it's kind of easy votes, an easy play for them, because it hits the bad guys, which are us, and it's very politically popular with their base. So and I think Baker, I was really surprised how quickly he caved on this. Like, I thought for sure that maybe he would, send it back for an amendment or something, but he didn't. He signed it on a Friday night, which is very telling. A news dump. So I don't like that. So
the cloak and dagger of this has bothered some people.
Exactly. Yep.
To use the political term. Let's lightning round a couple of these questions, just going in order from when they were come in. Alan asked the question, since you filed the case, or the filing was done in the SJC, what is your ability to appeal an unfavorable decision?
The only appeal would be to the U.S. Supreme Court. We're already at the top. We're already, the SJC is as high as you can go in Massachusetts. So the only court above that would be the U.S. Supreme Court. It actually could go up there, but someone's got to take it. It has to be one of these big, property rights organizations. Because
if that was to be done, do you think that would more be done to prevent precedent in years down the road? Because if that was the case probably would not be likely heard for at least 2 years, if not a year to 2 years. Would that more or less just be to establish taking it to the federal level, the U.S. Supreme Court? Would that be more of a case just to make sure that precedent was set moving forward, both potentially good and bad?
Yeah. That's one of the arguments that we've made in our case, is that this is going to open the door to some a similar action, even during the there's a COVID second wave, or if there's another Great Recession, or God forbid, or depression, they can bust out these moratoriums and think that it's perfectly legal when it's really not. These are very much unconstitutional, in my opinion. But of course, the problem is, once they expire, the case really is moot. I'm not sure what would happen then. So we're hopeful that, we're going to get some kind of action within, the next 2 months here. So, there's plenty of time. And again,
and of course, the other thing too, is there's no reassurance that the federal Supreme Court could, yield and pass the buck and decide not to hear it. So there's,
it's very, very hard. U.S. Supreme Court only takes 0.05 of the cases.
They could completely pass the buck anyway. So there's
absolutely. That. Yeah, absolutely.
One thing we have not touched upon and talked about in this is how this potentially affects commercial tenants. Somebody asked, what do I do about my commercial tenants, and how does this affect me?
So it also applies to a large number of commercial tenants. So the cutoff is the tenants that it does not apply to, you have to have 150 or more employees. So most of the commercial tenants have under that in Massachusetts. If they're international, does not apply. If they are multinational, if they have operations in other states, so like a chain, it doesn't apply. So basically, you're talking, medium to small in-state businesses in Massachusetts, the mom and pops, same protections virtually as residential, except you can send them default notices. So you can do that, but you cannot start an eviction. So, basically you're stuck with a non-performing tenant. You can't evict them.
Laura asked the question, can I send out a simple reminder of rent balance owed where I'm not mentioning the court in any way, shape, or form? I think you previously stated, and you reiterated it here today, you're best not to put anything in writing. Does that hold true even if you don't mention the court?
So if that's in the residential context, then my advice is do not send that. you only send the state approved form.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're going to get yourself into trouble. See, the problem is now also, if you do anything that's in violation of the act or the regulations, you can get hit with 93A consumer protection type of claim, retaliation. So you're just giving the tenant a defense that they can use later in the case once the courts eventually open up.
No, it's basically no self-inflicted wounds, essentially.
Yeah, and no self-help either. We are hearing stories about some landlords, scumbags, who are harassing tenants or, trying to push them out, bully them out. If I hear of that, I go ballistic, because that just kills all of us who are trying to do the right thing. And these tenant organizations are using those stories anecdotally. And we just had today on the Facebook Live, the lady from City Life was telling a story of, one of these situations, and, it just riles everyone up and it just makes us look like shit. So if anyone's listening to me, don't do that, please. Just respect the rule of law. And, we're filing the challenge, and we'll have to see how it plays out. But you can't use self-help in Massachusetts anyways. And especially now, you're going to get yourself into trouble, and you're going to hurt the cause.
It's not just you who need to be affected. You need to look at the collective whole and allow yourself to see the greater good here by just letting it settle for a little while and go from there. Yep. One person asked a question about getting a restraining order to get somebody out. An owner was threatened by the boyfriend and wants him out during the moratorium. She's in the process of evicting for non-payment by the girlfriend, who is the leaseholder.
Tricky situation. I mean, you can try to go to district court. They are hearing restraining order cases. So that's a situation where, there's the restraining order factors of whether you're in physical harm or whether there's a threat. Obviously the other side is going to say you're trying to flank the act, but, I would, certainly you could bring that in the district court and you can give it a shot. But if you're just, trying to use a 209A as a way around the act, that's not going to work. If you go for a restraining order, you need to sign an affidavit under pains and penalties of perjury that, you've been threatened with physical and imminent harm. And if you perjure yourself, then you've committed a felony. So don't do that either.
Is there anybody else who has any other questions for Rich before we move on? Thank you, Rich. This has been awesome, as always.
No problem.
One more, if you want to put out your contact information again, so anybody who would like to get in touch with you, have any other questions, or would like to support the cause or follow you on your blog, feel free to do so.
I'll just put my email address in the chat bar. Oops. So, well, everyone, I'll just it's rvetstein@vetsteinlawgroup.com. And the blog is massrealestatelablog.com. Awesome. And so I'll put you on our list and just check the blog for updates. And the minute I hear something, you might hear the screams from Framingham. Hopefully.
Awesome.
So, and also the if we get the SJC hearing, it'll be available on the web. So the court, does have these hearings publicly available. So you can, cheer on virtually. So that would be great.
Brilliant. Rich, we appreciate all you do for the landlords and the investors in the state, and also, sticking one to the big guys every now and again too, right? So
you got it.
You got a lot for us, and we appreciate you guys. Feel free to please go to his blog and his website. Support this the action. It's a lonely battle, especially when you're really trying to battle the big dogs. So obviously, Rich, you can stick around and answer questions, or I know you probably have to take off at some point. So
I do. We have work to do always. But thank you guys, and best of luck. And misery loves company these days. What can I say?
That is true. That's awesome. All right, we're going to switch gears over to Mr. Lumen. Tim has been in the network for years and years at this point, and he has he's gotten this niche where he loves to put together data. No idea why, but he's got lots and lots and lots of data that he loves to put together, and he shares it with a lot of the investment groups locally and maybe even nationally. Tim is going to do a magic trick for us because he has a presentation with 64 slides in it, and he has 25 minutes to get through them all. So, Mr. Luhman, are you on?
I'm on, I'm here, I need control, and then I'll fly through these faster than you can believe.
You got it. That's awesome. What I would ask you, sir, if possible, I'm going the national stats. If you wouldn't mind, the local stats are the most important. If you can go ahead.
You want to just skip national and go straight to local?
If there's a way we can just go right to mass, that would be great. And then that'll save some time too. So this is awesome. I'm looking at the data here, and it's pretty impressive. Is the easiest way, do you want to click through my screen, or do you want to just do your own share on your own screen? Because you've got it timed already, right?
Yeah, I can do my own, sure.
All right. Is Jared still on or not quite?
You're still there.
What I might do, yeah, I think I have to make you a co-host here. Give me a second. All right, Tim, you've been made a co-host, so that means you can share your screen when ready.
Okay. That means I have to know how to do that. Security, recording, share screen.
Thank you very much for putting this all together. So maybe slide 32, or however you want to do it, but that would be great. We got 25 minutes.
All right, can you see this first page?
I can?
Yes.
All right, let's roll. I'm going to start my own clock. Go. All right, so we are doing a spring housing market review. It's basically an inventory story in, what did you say, 64 slides. So first, we all know the devastation of the COVID to the economy, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. So the inventory story, can you guys see my cursor here?
Yes.
Excellent. So somewhere around here was the peak of the recession, the last one, and we had super high ratio of housing units to households. There's always more units available than there are households to fill in. So you see this is really tightening here, and that's why we've seen 5-7 years of increasing prices, just strictly because there's not enough inventory, right? The smaller this number gets, the closer it gets to 100, the tighter things are getting. I'm not going to explain this whole thing. This is a weekly economic index that is put out by the New York Federal Reserve. They have a number of weekly statistics here, and they created this basically because all the monthly and quarterly stats are really just too slow to see what's happening with the economy in real time. So I downloaded all their information. I put it into a little spreadsheet here. This is the graph. And just to point out, during the last recession, which was a housing recession, we never went down below 5%. Right now we're at 8.3%, and we peaked somewhere April, May at 11.5%. So we'll see how long this drags out in time, but we're doing a lot worse initially anyways than we did in the last recession. Continuous claims are people who are filing for their second, third, fifth, 10th week of claims. We peaked at 17.1% on 5/9, and we're currently at 14.1%, so that's a good trend. We're going down. And this is the U6. It's just another measure. It captures a lot more people. Peaked at 22.8% from a starting point of 6.9%. We've improved a little bit since then. All right, so this is a busy slide. I'm not going to hit everything here. This is the total amount of unemployed people, including all the federal and the pandemic unemployment assistance. And so we're somewhere around 29 million, 29.5, but that doesn't really capture everyone because all these states haven't yet started their PUA programs. So we don't really know what the stat is at the moment. So what's happening with mortgages as a result of this? Mortgages and forbearance are slowly ticking up, although the past 2 weeks it only went up 0.02% versus 20%, or 0.2% rather, the previous 2 weeks. So that's decelerating, which is good. And this is an April stat, and it just shows the loan to value of everyone who's in forbearance. Delinquencies are a quarterly stat, so a little slow. Q1 was up 0.5% from Q4. We'll see what happens with Q2 when that becomes available. This is a quick slide with May overview with mortgages. These are what's in delinquency, foreclosures. There's a lot of information here. Number of properties going up, 30 days, 90 days past due, everything's increasing, so the pressure is building.
Tim, on that one, just to go back, is up 20.43%. So that was from April to May. That's what that was?
Yeah, that's a month over month change, correct.
Okay, so from April to May.
Year over year is 130, it's even worse.
Right. Well, there was no COVID in 2019. Right. Do you have that data for June yet or not yet?
No, they just put this out today for May.
Okay, got it.
So June is going to be late July.
Okay, and so for all of you guys, this is the United States delinquency rate. The loans 30 or more days past due. So this would include also the people that have opted for the deferrals or forbearance. Do you know?
It's just delinquency, but not in foreclosure.
Okay. Okay, got
and
it.
The other thing too to mention is that this same report, and maybe you're going to get this in a second, Tim, announced that it's the highest level since 2011. That was just announced today as well.
I don't know if I captured that one. Let's see what I got. Oh, this is the April delinquency. So this company, Black Knight Inc., puts out a lot of stats and information on servicing. And just a couple of quick highlights. We went from 3% to 6.5% in like 2 months, and we went from 3 to 6. It took a couple of years, so the velocity is ridiculous. And also, just wanted to point this out: the rate by property value. If 645 is the national rate, and you carry that over, these two categories in the low end are really hurting, as you would suspect. So there's a lot of information there. I really encourage everyone to grab these slides and take a further look at them. I just want to respect the time that I was given and crank through these. So mortgage rates have been a big driver of purchase activity. You see we keep coming down, down, down. And you look at the much longer graph, we peaked somewhere here in the mid 80s, early 80s, and it's been a steady decline ever since. And just this quote from Chairman Powell, the Fed Reserve Chairman, said we're not even thinking about risk rates. And I believe he said he's sticking to 0 to 0.5 on the Fed rates through 2023 or something like that, 2022. And this was really interesting. I pulled the study, someone turned me on to this, for the history of pandemics using European data from 1314 to 2018. And a couple of conclusions that they draw, and we'll get into it more, is real wages are going to go up, right? Because there's less labor because people died. And they also showed that the interest rates maybe perk up a little bit and then come way down. So if we're already at 0 to 0.5, we're going to be in 10, 20 years. I mean, is the mortgage literally going to be a negative rate? I doubt it. And then just to highlight some of these conclusions, they said that pandemics are followed by multiple decades of depressed investment, possibly due to excess capital per unit of labor, a heightened desire to save, possibly due to an increase in precautionary savings or rebuilding of wealth. But then they also throw in this big caveat at the bottom that people didn't survive to old age, Black Death, and other plagues hit populations with the Great Mass in the pyramid, the age pyramid below 60. So maybe this time's different. We'll let you know in 200 years. All right, so real quick, new construction applications are going up, which is a definite reversal from April, which were down. We sold less than we did last year, but the trend is the same. I drew these quick sort of trend lines. Sometimes we bounce above, sometimes we bounce below, but as long as we rebound and stay in this trend, we're good. Right now we're below it. We'll see what happens over the next few months, and then we'll really be able to identify a trend. This is the same thing, just a 10-year chart, which sort of picks up right here, and this is the much longer view. And you can kind of see in this last recovery, we never really got back up here where we should have been, where we've been historically anyways, possibly due to all this overbuilding in the late 2000s. And this is just all the latest permits and starts. Everything fell off a cliff in April. See what happens in May. Hopefully it rebounds somewhat. And this is just the same thing. You can see blue is 2019, red is 2020. We were outpacing new construction, and then it all just fell off a cliff. Median prices went down 8.5%. Here we are, April. And that's because builders reduced their prices to sell houses. And here's what all the builders did. You do upgrades, pay for closing costs, reduce the price, help buyers sell the existing house, and so on. And just during the last recession, we were at 73, 71% of builders doing this. So there is some room for that to grow if need be. One thing I want to highlight is this median months on market. 2019, we ranged 3 to 3.6%. And you can see the last recession, we almost hit, I don't know, 14%, give or take. All right, new housing, super quick, mortgage applications are up. This is a nice stacked chart. See, we're blowing out everything. I'm assuming it's because of all this depressed demand for a couple months, so we're going to shoot over, and we'll see what happens if we come back down, or if it crashes down, or who knows. Existing sales are up, and this is a brand new thing I just looked at. The change from April to May every year has been up for the past 20 years, except for this month. What does that mean? I don't know. Not good. And transactions are way down as well. Not a big surprise. New listings are way down, 22.5%. And median days in the market, we're going to get to this when we get to the Massachusetts numbers. Just notice that it's kind of a rounding. It's a U-shaped bottom each time we go through the cycle. And then here we went into a giant V. So everything started taking longer all of a sudden, I assume due to COVID. Supply is up. We were back here. Six months is considered neutral. All right, who cares about all that? Let's get to Massachusetts. Super quick vacancy rates. This is just again to highlight that we are kind of full at 0.9% for homeowners versus the USA is at 1.4%. If you're thinking, okay, I don't have anywhere to buy, I'll rent. Well, we're kind of full here too. We're somewhere around 3-ish%. And the nation is somewhere around 6.5%, 7%. All right, this is a very busy slide. I'm going to pause on this for a brief moment. So this is the total amount of earnings, non-farm earnings that Massachusetts residents made in 2019. And then if you take all these sectors of our economy and break it down, again, this is earnings, what people made, people took home. And so I took this number, 741 for forestry and fishing, divided by this number, and it's this much of the economy. And there's a whole bunch of other crap here I'm going to skip, but it's good info. So April was pretty much right, the depths of it, we're saying, for layoffs. And then May we start to bounce back. So this is the peak number of employees that was either February or March. And then this is the April figure. And then this is the May figure. And this is the percent change from peak to April, peak to May. And then I also put in the change of April to May to see what's starting to bounce back. And so I didn't come up with these categories, but industry experts came up with these categories in red, both trade items, arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodation, and food services being most susceptible to these COVID shutdowns. I think you can make a case for construction as well, seeing how we lost 35% of the earnings. or I'm sorry, 35% of the jobs. So if you want to include that, you can look at the orange. So these red total 13.16. If you throw in construction, it's 19% of the earnings in the state. And of those, we lost 39% of the employees, or 38.6% of the employees, depending on how you want to count it. And that increased 3% or 5% if you throw in construction. So you can say it's bouncing back, but not by a whole lot. All right, moving along. So initial unemployment claims, we peaked way back here, and we like to see this continue to come down. Continuous unemployment, we peaked at 16.8 million, no, it's 16%, and we're down to 16.2, so that's coming down. I'm trying to measure demand here. I don't have a great yardstick, but Realtor.com has this, and Boston comes in at number 12 in the nation. And they're looking at median days on market and how much quicker they move than the national average. And they also just look at clicks, is how they're defining this. And then Worcester comes in right here at 21. So we would have two of the top 21 in the nation. And then when you look at the whole state, this is county measurements. And there's a lot going on here. I'm trying to show and apply this to Massachusetts, that there's a lot of anecdotes and some statistical evidence of urban flight out of the big cities that are, COVID infested, and who wants to ride the bus and the subway? Let's get out of here and move out to the burbs. And you can see that in San Francisco, and that might be related strictly to San Fran, is up about 4% for searches compared to last year. April, there was a poll saying 39% of urban residents would move to a less dense place, and 43% actually looked. And then there's another information in May that suburban zip codes jumped 13%, and that's double the pace of growth in urban areas. So the burbs seem to be where it's at. New construction permits down 46% from April. Don't have a May number yet. But you can see these construction permits, even on a long view chart, since the recovery, have been down compared to where we were in previous decades. Okay, super quick. So the mass realtors, and now we're going to get into my normal deck. How am I doing on time? 16 minutes, pretty good. So the mass realtors only lists the MLS transactions, whereas the Warren Group counts all transactions, MLS, off-market transfers, family transfers, so the stuff that we wholesale as investors, all that would get scooped up with Warren Group unless you're buying an investment property off the listings for some reason. Okay, so what happened? The past couple months, we had existing Massachusetts median price was up 4.74% in May and 11.68% in April, and those are year over year. So that's this top graph. And then the bottom is 5.23% for May, and that's a 12-month rolling average. And April had a 5.14% rolling average. So we're moving up nicely. Same idea. This is year-over-year median sales, just in a different picture. We blew it out up here. We never quite hit 10. And here we are, 11.68, and then we're back down to earth for May. Closed sales, 3,700 and 3,400 for April. Just kind of notice how it ramps every year. We get a nice ramp up in closed sales, and then here comes COVID and just squashed it. And same picture, just different. I'm sorry, same info, different picture. Way down, again, kind of had to redraw the charts. Almost 30% in May, off of 13% in April. Again, that's year over year.
And I'll jump in too, Tim, on that one of those two last slides. It was good to note. It seems like on that ramp, the graph especially, where Yeah, that one right there.
Yep.
Where COVID killed it. It's funny because it's not necessarily that buyers didn't want to buy anymore. It's that sellers just pulled their homes off the market. I mean, that's been our experience at least, right? So the demand's still there. It's the supply that was lacking.
Correct. Demand is still there, and we'll show that in a minute. I mean, supply is lacking. No, either way. Okay, so closed sales for a 12-month moving average, even factoring in the great sales that we had, which really weren't so great. You see it's still dropping off a cliff. We're back at like 2016 numbers. And then this is the Warren Group, which is very similar. I didn't spend a whole lot of time with the Warren Group. Median price was 11.9 and closed sales were off 13.39. And that's the top is median price and closed sales this year. All right, so here you go, Nick. New listings. Again, ramp, 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 ramp. Off 34% from May and off 50% from April. So I think that's exactly what you're saying, Nick, right? And then new listings on a 12-month rolling average, off 14% for May and 10% from April. And you can see it just started to tick way down. Okay, then Massachusetts inventory, again to Nick's point, we were down 36% from May and year over year 28.5% from April. And then here's the year over year. But we've been here before. This is not completely unprecedented. If you look back in 2016, someone tell me what happened in 2016, but we've been here before. And then month supply, 6 months is considered neutral. We're at 1.9 months. And this goes back to cumulative days on market that we saw increasing in the national market. We are still decreasing. We went from 50, we're at 53 rather, which is down from 60 days, May 2019. And we had an even bigger improvement in April. I don't know why we're so divergent from the national. Curious to hear if anyone has any opinions on that, but.
We work faster up here in the Northeast. Faster.
Yeah. Okay, so pending home sales, trying to get a peek into the future. For Massachusetts in April, we were 38% down. So I'm expecting June sales to be way down and the national was 22%. Don't have a national number yet for pending May home sales. But for Massachusetts, we were only down 7.6 over May 19 and median prices again up. So when that national figure comes out, I will update that. This is the Case-Shiller Index, which measures housing pairs, meaning the same house selling over and over and over. And it's different than, of course, the median price, because that median price could be very skewed depending upon the mix of what's selling and what isn't. If you sell a bunch of low-end stuff, right, the median price would come down, vice versa on the high end. So that could be skewed, but this is the same house selling over and over. So this is the best measure, but the problem is it's slow. We're still in March, so we haven't captured any of this COVID stuff yet. And this is the same thing, just in a much longer time frame. Massachusetts has pretty much run step in step with the national, but over it. And you can see a little wider divergence here. I don't know if that's a trend. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out, but nothing to see there yet. So I'm trying to find new sources of potential inventory. Where are we going to come from? One idea I have is Airbnb. In Boston alone, there's 3,500 listings. 64% will say are whole houses or apartments. And of these 3,500 listings, 73.5% have multiple listings. So if you have multiple houses that are on Airbnb and you can't fill them, how long can you survive until you either need to convert them to a straight rental, traditional 12-month rental, or until you just say, well, housing prices are at a high, let me just sell it now and cash out. I don't know. There's a lot of small business support. We'll have to wait and see what happens with, all the government support that's out there, and see if we get a runoff from some of these Airbnb properties. Second idea I've had is divorces. Unfortunately, people are cooped up together, and not everyone turns out likes each other. Some studies in Hong Kong after SARS, divorces were up 21% over 2002 levels. There are anecdotal stories, but there's no real hard data yet on what we're doing in 2020 over, say, 2019 or 2018. Third is going to be, I assume, foreclosures. We're going to have to continue. Delinquencies are rising. We'll have to wait and see what happens with the government support and when all these guys start to get processed. And then the last one, unfortunately, and this is going to tie into foreclosures, is going to be layoffs. I'm pretty much saying that the first wave was low-income service jobs, the bars and restaurants and concerts and everything that got closed. But we're seeing recently a new wave of government jobs and corporate downsizing. And just one example I pulled from the Lowell Sun the other day was 66 school districts have sent out layoff notices to teachers and other educators, ranging from a couple to 100. And there's 150 layoffs notices just in Taunton. Hardest hit are Weymouth, Medford, and Brookline, if anyone's in that market. And that is all I have. You have graduated the spring 2020 housing market overview, and that checks in at 24 minutes, but I give myself a pass because I got interrupted a couple of times.
Tim, I'd say that was an excellent job. There's a lot of data, a lot of information to gather there.
There is. I'm happy to go over anything else. And just to sort of answer Nick's question at the start, this is all the stuff that I look at sort of on a daily, weekly basis. I get an email and I look at it, and it goes in the memory hole, and it gets thrown out 2 weeks later. And so I said, well, I'm just sitting here in this pandemic. Let me put all this stuff together and make a real story out of it.
Fantastic job. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well done,
Question.
Tim. That's
Happy to go over anything, or if Nick wants to move on, that's fine too.
no, it's brilliant. I think there's a lot of data to regurgitate and to swallow and to analyze in what you just presented. The challenge for me, and it's a personal challenge, is I lose my daycare in 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do, if you guys want to type your questions into the chat box, feel free, and then Tim can comment, Matt can comment on them. I am going to try to get through my slides, which is the economic injury disaster loan program. And with our CPAs not being present, I'm going to be doing my best, but I also probably won't be able to answer a ton of really in-depth questions, but I can answer the kind of our questions that we have had as a company. So Tim, thank you so much. I'm going to just transition, but feel free just to type your questions into the chat box. And I'm going to do a quick screen share myself. Okay, and share. All right, y'all can see that? Can y'all see the slide there?
Yeah.
Matt? Okay, cool. Most of you guys already know who we are. So this is the real estate group. This is Matt, myself, Jared, Brianna, Lori, gosh, lots of people. And I'm sure I already forgot people and I've already upset people. But we have a home buyer division, a short sale debt negotiation division, a brokerage, property management, a coaching and consulting program, and an investment servicing division. But no one cares about that today. We are in phase 2-3. I'm going to just bash through this. We did the phases at our last webinar. Feel free to take a look at that one for the phases and what's coming next and how people are protecting and preparing their businesses for what's to come next. So here's what we had. And I briefly mentioned this at the end of the last webinar that we did. We have applied and successfully been approved for our SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Now, the few caveats to this, a lot of you, this is what we all applied for way back in early March when they were pushing out, hey, go to this website and fill out this information and fill out this application. And do you want a free $10,000? Click the little checkbox, right? So if you did that, it's taken until like now, the last couple weeks, for the SBA to email you back based on whatever email you put into those applications and say whether you were pre-approved, in which case if you were pre-approved, they sent you an email, you had to set up a portal by clicking through on the email and setting up a password and then verifying your identity and then choosing the amount of money you wanted to apply for. And it was up to a maximum of $150,000. Now they used whatever function. Some people got $37,000 offerings. We got one that was like a $30,000, one and a few that were $150,000 for LLCs. So depending on what you submitted to them back on that application. It's up to $150,000. The terms of the loan are 3.75% over 30 years. So it went, especially if you're in the real estate business, that sounds like an amazing long-term loan. And it's definitely one you should take advantage of, but it's something that you also need to read the paperwork very, very carefully. Again, this was our experience. So we started reading the paperwork and saw that there were some challenges in there. And if you don't use it correctly, or if you miss something, or if you don't properly record or account for something, the penalty is 150% of the loan amount. So I'll show you kind of what that looks like from our side. There it is. So here's some text directly from the loan application when you get it. So this is for $150,000 loan. It's $731 monthly, but you don't start paying it until 12 months from the date that you sign the closing docs, which is again to help spur the use of those funds for the next 12-month period to help reduce the economic injury and your impact. And by signing the loan documents, you are also saying you're under a fraud statute if you have lied. If you have not been impacted by COVID, then you shouldn't be applying for this loan. Then you'd fall under the fraud statute. But most people in the real estate industry, we have been impacted in some way, shape, or manner. Housing provider, real estate agent, real estate broker. I won't get into the application process because we've covered that in a few different loans back and forth. So there's interest. Here's the collateral for amounts greater than $25,000. Then the collateral is all the business assets, tangible and intangible personal property, including but not limited to inventory, equipment, instruments, promissory notes, chattel, electronic, so notes, documents, letter of credit. Basically, you're securing all of your business assets with this. I'm going to keep moving forward. Here's the requirements relative to collateral. You won't sell or transfer any collateral described in the paragraph without the prior written consent of SBA. So again, if you look to sell your business or if you're selling equipment in your business, you'd have to get permission from the SBA so they can release that, or they might require some payback too, to release some of the collateral that's backed by the loan. And use of loan proceeds. And here's the big one. Whoa, here's the big one. Borrower will use all the proceeds of this loan solely as working capital to alleviate economic injury caused by the disaster occurring in the month of January 31 and occurring thereafter. Working capital is the weird definition. So working with CPAs that we know and other ones that are national that Matt and I both know, it turns out that working capital, this is opinion, but also we're waiting on a bigger guideline. I wish the CPAs were here to answer, but you cannot use this for paying for exchanging debt, for paying down high interest debt and using it for low interest debt. You cannot use it if you're relocating. In fact, it says that right there at the second paragraph down. Borrower will not use directly or indirectly any portion of the proceeds of this loan to relocate without the prior written permission of the SBA. So if you're expanding your office, you might be able to make some arguments there. But if you're relocating your office, you have to get permission. And usually you can't use it to I'm sure there's ways around that, but I'm just reading to you what the language says. And be very, very careful as to how you're documenting the use of these proceeds. We put ours into a separate bank account completely, and we're really only trying to use it for payroll, for rent, for utilities, for taxes, for things that keep us going. Working capital, right? Working capital. And borrower will, to the extent feasible, purchase only American-made equipment and products with the proceeds of this loan. There you go, right there. So here's some ideas that we have come up with. Now, if you have separate LLCs, if you're a real estate agent and you're a real estate investor and you're a wholesaler, you also own some rental properties, maybe you received a couple of these different loans, right? Or maybe you received one of them, but it went to one of your entities that was impacted, but you need to use cash in another entity, right? we have a lot of our expenses flowing through like our parent company, which is AA Real Estate. So what we did is we received these loans on a couple of the other property, like in a couple of the other entities, like let's say the brokerage, but we can only use it for working capital. So we're probably not going to spend down all of the money in there, but that is going to be used for like rent, utilities, labor, and working capital. But meanwhile, the brokerage itself would pay back an asset management fee to, let's say, to the rehab company, right? Or to the home buying entity. We use that as an asset management company. So if you can do an asset management fee from a company that doesn't necessarily, that you can reinvest the revenue generated from that, not the SBA proceeds, but the actual income being generated by that company can be pushed out to one of your entities that you need the cash for more. We do that in the way of asset management. Check with your bookkeepers, check with your CPAs on the best way to set that up. Another person, we have not done this yet, but we're going to be looking into it. And I have a call into both DCU and Enterprise Bank. A lot of them are not even using the funds. They're putting the funds, the capital, into a cash account at their bank, and then they're going to the same bank and getting a line of credit that uses that money as security. So I've got $150,000 in the bank. I want to take out a line of credit from you for 75 grand or 80 grand or 100 grand. That's backed by this cash account that I can't touch. And by doing that, they then can use that line of credit to pay off low interest debt, invest in new inventory, invest in tech, invest in whatever they want to do that's not purely working capital, which is that language we're trying to avoid using, right? So really kind of a cool move there. We're checking into DCU and Enterprise. You check with your local bank, especially where you got the loan, what loan, where it's been funded, as to what they have to offer you. And the other update that I had, again, the CPAs had a better update, but here's what I put together. About 5 days ago, the Forgiveness Flexibility Act, this is the PPP loan, different loan than that economic injury disaster loan. PPP was that payroll protection loan that you received from your local lender that was backed by the SBA. And that was the one we all were excited about it, because if you used it correctly to keep the same amount of full-time employees and to keep people employed as best you could get it forgiven to you. And we covered a lot of the application stuff, but here's some of the highlights. There was a revised PPP loan forgiveness application that was put out about 5 days ago. So because we're approaching the end of that initial 8-week period, we're going to start working with our lenders to try and get that loan forgiven, which is what we were promised at the onset. But a couple ones, I'm not going to read all of them here. Borrowers that received loans before June 5th, though, can now choose between using them. You had to expend all these funds in 8 weeks, but they've changed that now. They've elongated it to a 24-week covered period. Nice of them to do that. Tough for a lot of us that jammed it all into the 8-week period because we didn't know they were going to do that. Doesn't matter. You can opt for the 8-week or the 24 weeks, depending on how you've already planned it out with your bookkeeper or your CPA. Safe harbors for excluding the salary and hourly wage reductions and reductions in number of employees, for FTEs they call them, full-time equivalents. It can be applied as the date of the application is submitted. So we were going to have to wait until December 31 to apply for forgiveness to use safe harbors, but now they've said that you can do that as early as the application. Here's the better part. So there's an application there's a full application, but then they also made this EZ application, which is nice of them. I looked at both. You can look at both. You'll see it. There's no link actually, because it's a super long link, but you can Google, it's right here. Loan forgiveness application. You can Google that and there's an EZ one with EZ, but here's this one. If you are self-employed and have no employees, or did not reduce the salaries or wages of your employees by more than 25% and did not reduce the number of hours of your employees, or experienced reductions in the business activity as a result of health directives related to COVID and did not reduce salaries or wages by more than 25%. If you hit any one of those three, you can fill out the EZ application, which is even easier than the main application. It's cool how they do that, and this is one place the SBA and the government actually did step up. They're quasi-governmental agency, but they made the application for this loan very, very, very easy. And now it looks like they're trying to make their forgiveness pretty easy for the small business owner as well. For the large business owners, there's a more in-depth process, but that was pretty promising. A couple other things that they put out. The minimum terms for the PPP loans, for the non-forgiven portion. is raised to 5 years. It was a 2-year loan, and now it's a 5-year loan. And if you take let's say you got a $500,000 PPP loan, amortized over 2 years, that's a pretty hefty monthly payment. So this has gone to 5 years from 2, which is good. Proportion that had to be used on payroll was 75%. They reduced that down to 60. And the application deadline for the PPP loans remains June 30th, 1 week. You have roughly 1 more week to contact your local lenders and try to get approved for that PPP forgiveness, the loan. Again, DCU is great to work with. People in here work with Enterprise, people work with Salem 5. Definitely reach out to them to see if you do need help to keep your staff. That is still an excellent way to go. And here's what we're doing now. So we're approaching the end of the 8 weeks. So we're reaching out to our lender saying, hey, listen, we're ready to start the forgiveness forms. We've properly documented all where the cash went. We have our payroll forms. What do you need? Do you have any special forms that you want us to fill out, or do you want us just to use that SBA form? And either way, most likely that bank is going to have to use their own SBA form to get that loan forgiven with the SBA and insured. So just Google PPP loan forgiveness application right to the SBA site, and you'll see the data that's in there that you can use for the PPP loan application. So for right now, I would love to take questions. I'm freaking out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn maybe Matt, can you be able to answer any of these questions? And Tim, you can answer some of the stats questions. Is that all right?
Sure.
All right. So I appreciate everyone very, very much. I'm going to turn this over to Matt while I go and just make sure my care is good and is taking off. So thank you guys very, very much. Go ahead, Matt and Tim. Anybody have any questions? I guess that's probably where we'll start. Does anybody have any questions that are in the chat, or you want to just pose to these guys individually?
I think there's one other thing too that Nick did not mention about the PPP program, that the new revisions that came out that basically said when the loan was created, or when the act was created, there was a law, or the part of the law that suggested use 75% of the loan proceeds on payroll. That has actually been lowered. That is now down to 60%, and that's changed. So these things are constantly changing. So just keep that in mind as well. All this information readily available online. We're happy to answer any questions that you guys have. You can see right there on the screen as well how you can connect with us if you do have any questions. You can find us on Facebook, AA Real Estate Mentor, for those of you who just are listening, AA Real Estate Mentor, and the AA Real Estate Group on Facebook. Same tags on Instagram, AA Real Estate Mentor and AA Real Estate Group. Somebody is constantly monitoring those. So if you have any questions day or night, you can feel free to reach out to that. I actually want to circle back and talk to Tim for a second on inventory levels. Tim, in the data that you have looked at, where do you see the data correlation coming from beginning of the winter time, going back to late 2019, say November of 2019, going up until March? Do you see, where were those inventory levels in comparison to where we were at the height of the coronavirus?
All right, so we were, let me see.
I think why Tim's pulling this up, I think one of the biggest, I don't want to call it misconceptions that was out there, is a lot of people have said that the spring market is the robust market to try and sell a home in. And there were a lot of people who come winter time said, you know what, I'm going to wait till the spring to list my house. That market never came. And there was a pretty actually robust early part of the spring, the January and February market, because thank goodness New England did have a relatively mild winter in comparison to years past. So there was an ability for people to get out and take a look at homes. There weren't the constant snowstorms. There weren't the massive blizzards in this area. There was an opportunity for people to get out, but still people decided that they did not want to put their home on the market and they would just simply wait for the spring market, but the spring market never came. As things have started to reopen the last couple of weeks, I think we're starting to see what would have been the spring market, which is I think why Tim's alluded to. You've seen the uptick come in terms of the inventory just over the last couple of months. It's still far behind where it was previously, but it's almost as if everything has been scaled back by a period of 3 months.
I don't know if I can grab control of the screen, but on my spreadsheets anyway, our inventory was down year over year since June. June is the last time we had an increase in year over year inventory. We've been down ever since.
So that's June 2019, I'm guessing you're saying?
Correct. That's June 2019 relative to 2018, year over year.
So every month since June of 2019, there's been a decrease in inventory year over year.
Correct. And it started, so it was 128 in June was positive. Then we went negative in July, call it 4%. August was 8%. September was 11. October is 12. November is 17. December was 20%. It just got progressively worse over the winter as far as inventory. Now prices kept going up, which reflects the lack of inventory.
It's simple supply and demand economics there.
Correct.
I think the other thing,
and then secondly, talking about new listings, just the volume of new listings has decreased since March of 2019.
okay,
So April
roughly
19 relative to April 18, it's gone down every month except for February 2020, it went up.
I think there are two things that people need to be, if I was to look into a crystal ball and say, and people ask this quite frequently, is what is the metrics that people should be paying attention to? I think there's two, and Tim alluded to both of them. Number one, pay attention to urban flight. I really think this is going to be something to keep an eye on as people decide to have a mass migration out of the city and into the suburbs. The suburb market in the next couple of months is going to be fascinating for a variety of different things, especially, and this will be key, and people need to pay close attention to this in the next couple of weeks, what the school systems decide to do. If a lot of the school systems decide, quite frankly, that they're not going to open up come August or come September, and people are going to be stuck at home doing Zoom, there are going to be a lot of homeowners who make the decision that I'm in a school district where, quite frankly, I'm not getting the same actual care in the school system that I wanted to get. Do I need to be in a top flight school system because my kid's just going online for Zoom? There's going to be a interesting focus on this probably as we get into the later parts of the summer. This piece number two to take a look at is people flocking outside the city and out into the suburbs and into more isolated, quote unquote, communities. Now, isolated communities is potentially smaller communities, less dense communities, areas of smaller population. Those cities, and there are plenty of them in the greater Boston area, I think you're going to see an uptick in inventories in those places and a rapid increase in terms of pricing. So keep that in mind as well when you're looking. There's still great opportunities out there. If you're a real estate agent, the only thing I can say to you right now, if you're watching this, is get onto the numbers, know your area, and be able to talk to sellers about what prices you're going to be able to get right now versus where we could be in a couple of months down the road. The second thing that Tim alluded to, and this goes back to even what Rich was talking about when we first started this, is the moratorium on evictions and the moratorium on foreclosures. As we highlighted here, mortgage delinquencies and foreclosure delinquencies hit their all-time high in 9 years today. That report came out from Black Knight, the same report that Tim was alluding to. Borrowers in May surged to 4.3 million borrowers are now behind in some way, shape, or form on their mortgage delinquencies. That's the highest level it's been at in 9 years. That number isn't going to decrease in the next couple of months. When the mortgage market opens back up and the foreclosures all of a sudden start coming around, I hate to say this, folks, but there is going to be a rapid rise in inventory as people have to figure out if they fight the ability to get their house in foreclosure, if they figure out that they're just going to sell the house and try to get out from under it. In Boston, probably not going to be penalized that much in terms of equity. Short sales might see a pickup coming around here the next couple of months as well. Keep an eye on that. But the inventory levels that will be created when the foreclosure market opens back up might just be the tipping point to get this back into a place where we're seeing inventory levels all of a sudden rise. I don't know when that's going to be. If I had to guess, I would say it's going to be Q1 of 2021, but that's not for at least 6 months down the road. So we'll have to see what the next 6 months hold in terms of inventories. But right now, if you're thinking about selling your house, maybe you should be talking to a real estate agent, because this might be the time to get the highest possible premium for your house. And if you're thinking about waiting till 2021, that might be a shot in the dark in terms of where inventory levels are. If you want to be selling when inventory is at its lowest point to get the most amount of buyers, because as Tim alluded to, there is a ton of pent-up demand right now, and that's what's keeping prices at their price point so high. So a lot of great information. It is just after 4:30. We promised we wouldn't keep you after 4:30. I appreciate everybody's time on here. To my team, to Jared, Brianna, thank you so much for helping out with all this. Nick, thanks you guys as well. We will be doing a couple more of these. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and on Instagram, AA Real Estate Group, AA Real Estate Mentor, both pages. Be sure to stay up to date. We're going to be putting out a lot more content in the month of July and into the month of August and moving forward. So make sure you follow us on all those pages to be keeping up to date as best you can with everything. Rich has already left. We thanked him already. Tim, thank you so much for your time today for the stats.
You're welcome. I just dropped a picture of the inventory in the chat.
Yep. A lot of great information, a lot of great data. Arm yourself with the data. So if you're a real estate agent, arm yourself with the best data possible so you can have the best information for your clients. If you're an investor, go ahead and make sure that you have the same information as well so you can make the best decisions that you possibly need to be able to make. I wish you all a very pleasant rest of your week. Continue to stay safe. Continue to make smart decisions, whatever you're going to be doing, wherever you're going. All the best to your individual families. All the best to you folks moving forward. We will see you on down the road. Thank you so much for your time here, ladies and gentlemen. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you on down the road.